Joshua has been an environmental consultant for over 13 years, working on projects across the Mid-Atlantic in oil and gas, land development, transportation, and water quality program management. He's worked on numerous multidisciplinary projects that require engineering, architecture, and environmental services. So everyone, please welcome Josh, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me, everyone. I appreciate the introduction. My talk is on permitting codes and ancillary engineering, the other side of a successful AMD AML project. So this talk, just to give you a little bit of a background, is more of how project management and how partnership can kind of make or break a project, and kind of looking at it as you're going through those steps of project conception moving forward. This is, I'm a very interactive person, so you're going to see me moving and walking and flailing my hands. If you guys have questions, comments, thoughts, raise your hand during the presentation. I'd like to address stuff as you think about it, because somebody else might be thinking the same thing as we go through the presentation. As I said, most projects require a varying degree of services. So, in working in the AMD AML field, everybody's like, hey, here's an AMD discharge with a pH of 3.5. It's got these metals in it. This is how we're going to treat it. We come up with this cool treatability. But then it's like, how do we make that a reality? So looking at those services of, we need an access road. Do we need buildings on the site? Is there culverts on that access road? What type of permitting do we have to go through, whether it be environmental, zoning, stormwater, anything like that? It's building that whole project out and understanding how we do that. Biggest thing is proper planning and partnerships are critical at this juncture in this part of the project. So understanding who's going to be your partnership, obviously, you know, the big PA and partnership, the theme of this conference is huge, and that's something that I'm going to stress. The more partners you have and understanding that early on in the planning process can be the difference between an on budget and a project that's done on time and on budget versus a project that takes way longer and requires a lot more effort. So what makes a successful project? We want to achieve the project goal. So in these AML, A&D, we want to treat water, we want to improve water quality, we want to improve the landscape, we want to reclaim these legacy coal impacts across Pennsylvania. Okay, that's a primary goal. Everybody has it. We want to clean up this AML pile. We want to treat this discharge. 2, we want to complete it at or below budget. So you go to a project, it's going to cost X number of dollars. We need to find funding, whether it be through private entities, public entities, grant funding, government programs, whatever have you. But we have to have a budget because we have a specific pot of money, so we want to complete it at or below budget. 3, we want to complete it on time. A lot of these funding sources where maybe landowners are thinking, you don't want this project to last 10, 12 years. You want to complete that on time, the time frame that was set maybe in the planning, or within a reasonable time frame that it fits within your grant funding or other parameters that you might have. Don't want to cause undue stress. As a project manager, I see some project managers here in the group, we've had sleepless nights, thinking about this, you're over budget, something's happening, you've had a costly delay that's now delayed a project 6 months. You want to reduce the stress for you and your staff as you're doing this. No one likes the 16-hour days sitting in the office trying to fix something that wasn't anticipated. And all this comes down to project planning and management. Successful projects have those 2 things in common: how you manage the project and how the planning of the project goes. No, it doesn't want to work.
Cute. Oh, okay, my fault. Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
So, if you take anything from my presentation, take this. You don't know what you don't know. This is something that was told to me years ago as I was getting into project management and understanding this. Everybody thinks they know everything until you don't. And this graphic is probably the best I've ever found. The green part, what you know. The blue part, what you know you don't know. And everything else is the things that you know you don't, what you don't know, what you don't know. There's always things in the project. You can't be an expert on everything. I have an environmental science background. I don't pretend to understand what building codes are or maybe how to design, do a geophysical evaluation on a project. That's why you have technical people and build that partnership and the great project team going forward. This is something that as you go through projects, especially as projects get larger, it's something very critical that people need to understand. So, critical components of the project: project team, project planning, and time management. These three components are the basis of my presentation and kind of what I want to discuss. Project team, that partnership, understanding who should be on the team, when they should be involved, how they should be involved, understanding their ideas and perspectives. Project planning, when do we have to do components? How does this project go? When do we have to apply for funding? When does the funding become available? What milestones in the funding do we have to have? What milestones do we have to hit through design, through construction? You know, we don't want to be building a project that has a lot of concrete in the wintertime. Now we have cold weather concrete, and we have to increase the cost of construction because of that. And then that goes into time management. Understanding how permit timeframes go, construction timeframes, when you should be bidding, how you should be doing that, all can reduce the times of your project. Project team. So this is, I wanted to talk about this first because obviously partnership is our theme of the conference. So I have a list here. We can go through a couple of them of who might be on a project team. Now you don't need this list for every project out there. It should be something you should be thinking, who's going to add value to my project? Who should be there? The first one, the project organizer, lead entity. Who's going to own this project? Whose project is this? They're kind of the one that's got to, as I like to say, herd the cats into one room. Okay, you need those people to how we're going to build the team. Next big one is the project manager. This person is going to ensure that the project stays on track throughout its conception, whether it go through design, if you're going to hold them all the way through construction, project manager is key. The rest of these can all be interjected at various components. They might have big roles, they might have little roles. What does your project entail? The landowner. We want to make sure the landowner is okay with what's happening. Do I need a half acre? Do I need 20 acres? Are we reclaiming 100 feature? They need to be okay with it. Regulatory agencies are great partners. They're the ones that approve your permits, or maybe have the funding. Bringing them on board early to understand their constraints and how they can be involved is critical. The engineer. Most A&D, pretty much every A&D and AML project needs some type of engineering, whether it be a civil, construction, structural, electrical, plumbing, mechanical, depending what your project is. Engineers are critical to, because you need that stamp on those design plans. But what engineers do you need? Now, sometimes the lead engineer might be your project manager, but all these other disciplines are just technical components that are doing the one technical aspect of that project and then moving on. Surveyors, environmental, cultural specialists, architects, those are specialty disciplines depending on what you have. Do you have environmental permitting? Do you have to do property boundary? Are you removing monuments from property corners when you're reclaiming those AML projects? That those need to be reestablished so people know where their property ends. All components depending on the project. Concerned citizens. Concerned citizens sometimes are a great asset, and actually are a great asset all the time because they have the local knowledge, the local understanding. They know who we need to talk to in the community. Maybe they have relationships with landowners that you didn't think of that we need to get access to. So they should be obviously considered. Then the last three that most people don't think about, accountants, lawyers, or public relations. These entities, depending on your project, accounting. If you have a large grant funding project, we heard this morning, those solar projects are 90 million, 100 some million dollars. I didn't go to school to be an accountant. Wish I took the course, but maybe having someone that can manage the money, understanding the reporting, understand who's getting paid, how they're getting paid, and making sure we're in compliance with that program would be a great add to the team. Lawyers, sometimes there's legal agreements that need to be composed, and maybe it's just at the beginning part of the project, they're moved on. And then public relations, you want to make sure you have a good view of the project. So having somebody that's reporting back out to stakeholders, concerned citizens, neighbors, having that information. Due diligence. Once you've assembled a project team, this is something that, depending on the project, I think is very important. Understanding project feasibility, understanding where the funding might be coming from, understanding design criteria, understanding permits, understanding legal obligations. So in due diligence, we see this in a bunch of different ways. We see large due diligence reports that can be done on very large, complex projects, which identify maybe potential project, sites. If you have a discharge, but you can't put the treatment right at the discharge, it has to be downstream. Looking at property owners that might have interest in that. Looking at where the funding is going to come from. What's the match requirement? Where are we getting the match? Okay. What type of permits could we encounter? So are the design costs going to be $150,000? Are they going to be $850,000? Are the construction costs going to be $1 million? Are they going to be $10 million? This due diligence report is something that as you scale up on the size of projects is something very critical. On smaller projects, you can do it at a much smaller level. The one thing, in looking at the definition of due diligence, a third party, sometimes this needs to be done by somebody that isn't directly involved. I know in our firm at Larson Design Group, we do due diligence for some clients and then don't ever see anything on the back end because they want somebody, fresh eyes, looking at this to move forward. Because if other people have vested interest, sometimes they omit things or don't think about things, versus a third party will have that non-biased opinion of the project. So now the other parts of the project, what my title of my presentation was. These are all components of AMD AML projects that I've encountered in my career, and that has either progressed or moved through a project, and how we want to talk about them. Obviously permits, and we're going to go into in-depth into these, but this is not an all-inclusive list, so don't take this and think if I check all these boxes, like, you're going to catch everything. These are just some items that we've encountered through the years. Permits. This one and this graphic I thought was hilarious when I found it. I feel like that's what everybody thinks about when we go into the permits. It's a lot of paperwork. We got to talk to a lot of people. We got to make sure all the check boxes are checked, all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, whole 9 yards. So this is a list of projects or permits that you might encounter. Your stormwater, your NPDS, ENS plans, so on and so forth. Your environmental clearances. Chapter 102 is ENS. Chapter 105 is wetlands and streams. Chapter 106 is floodplains for public entities. So if you have public funding, you have to go through a Chapter 106 permit if you're impacting a floodplain. Army Corps, and then threatened and endangered species permits. Depending what agency you're dealing with, whether it be U.S. Fish and Wildlife, DCNR, Fish and Boat, Pennsylvania Game Commission. So and this is all pertinent to Pennsylvania. So you go outside of other states, that's a whole nother bucket of fish that we don't have time to get into. Zoning and setbacks, something that you have to deal with your township, your local municipality. What's your project zoned? Are there setbacks from property lines? Anything like that. Your building codes, if you put a building up, depending on accessibility, are people going to be there? How often are they going to be there? Do you need a restroom on site? Different building codes have that. Your floodplain permits, we already talked about. Highway occupancy permit. You're building an access road into a site. You got to talk to PennDOT if it's on a state road of getting access, or the municipality, roadmaster. Then special use permits. Depending on certain public lands, you need a permit to actually even be able to do anything. Even doing sampling, doing field investigations, you need a special use permit from those regulatory agencies. So environmental component of projects. This is my chosen field. As noted, I'm still an environmental consultant. A lot of the projects I've done was from the environmental component before I got into overall project management. So these are some components that we've dealt with there. Your wetland stream delineations, your floodplains, your phase 1 and phase 2. New NPDS permits coming out. Phase 1 and phase 2 is a checkbox. Now, something that you have to look at on projects going forward. Threatened and endangered species. Just doing a PINDY may not be all you have to do. The PINDY program here in Pennsylvania, you can go on, look, if it says all clear, you can move right along. Sometimes it says there's agency coordination. You have to look at what your project is. There's construction restrictions for bat on tree cutting. There's in-stream restrictions for fish, whether it's a trout stock fishery, whether it's naturally reproducing trout. So there's additional coordination that you have to do. Sometimes there's additional studies that you have to do in order to clear that PINDY to get that through that process. Invasive species surveys. This is something we see a lot on public lands, state forest lands if you're doing work. They want to see what invasive species are there. Because sometimes during construction, those construction crews will bring invasive species onto the site. They want to be able to understand what invasives were there. Up in the northern Pennsylvania, Tioga County, where I'm very familiar, spotted knapweed is everywhere. Well, you go out and say, hey, there's spotted knapweed here, there's going to be spotted knapweed after we build the project. But you go up there and all of a sudden now there's mile a minute on your site. That might have been introduced during the construction of that project. Mitigation and restoration. Did you impact any streams or wetlands while doing this? Do we have to restore them? Do we have to mitigate for their, for the impacts that were there? And then lastly, cultural resources. Looking at the historical component of this, coordinating with PHMC, that sometimes can turn into phase 1, phase 2 archaeological studies, which depending on your site can definitely impact projects. Stormwater, your NPDS permits, we talked about that with the phase one, that's a checkbox. The wetland delineation is also a checkbox. So doing that permit, you do need an engineer to complete that permit, doing your stormwater calcs, depending on, and that's only for projects that impact more than 1 acre. Stormwater design, your ENS controls, infiltration testing, and then site inspections. Something that we're seeing with some projects is actually they want inspections to happen after certain rain events, whether it be a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, to make sure that those ENS controls and other DMPs that are on site are actually maintaining and doing what they're supposed to do. Because if they would go out there, a notice of violation would be issued, and then you'd have to redo it anyhow. So something to think about as we go forward. Geotechnical, so this is something, if you have foundations, you're putting tanks on, going out and doing your, they do your foundation recommendations, retaining walls, your borings, your car studies, geophysical studies. So in the picture here, I call our geotech geologist. He had a picture. This is actually a drill rig doing those borings to get those recommendations. Depending on what you're building and what the geology and the soils are at that spot, that can basically be the difference of how your foundations are designed, how wide they can be, and certain load bearings. Like I said, I'm not a geotechnical engineer, I'm an environmental guy, but it can drastically impact your project. Do you need to have 5 borings done, 2 borings done? How big's your site? And then how's your foundation designed to go from that structural component? Access road and culvert design. Every site needs a way to get to it. I can put a site up on top of a mountain, but if I don't have a road to get to it, it's kind of pointless. So understanding roadway improvements, turning radiuses, obviously if you're building a building, your parking spot requirements, if you're gonna have people there, full-time, part-time, how many people you have, some of that will come from building codes. Roadway grades, when you're constructing, you can't go up certain grades. So you don't want an 18% grade going up over the side of a mountain when you need, 20 tractor trailer loads to deliver the equipment for your site. What's needed. And then obviously putting a culvert, if you're crossing a stream, do you need an H&H analysis? How that's moving. So all different components that one parts of the team in that partnership, having a structural engineer, having a roadway engineer, understand that component of the project. Those guys can build a culvert, design a culvert, get everything ready, move it on, continue the project. Buildings. I have Quay Schappell from our company here. He does a little bit more of this on his side, but building codes, layouts, and then MEPs, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and structural. All components depending on what you need. Do you need a garage there? What type of electrical system is it going to be? What type of electrical service? Do you need to run an electrical line coming to that facility? Where's the nearest electrical line? Designing sub panels. Plumbing. Is there water needed? Is there a lab on site? For them, so do they need water? Is there a bathroom on site? Your mechanical components of if it's a treatment system, what type of mechanical components, and then your structural, you're actually building design, understanding those building codes, taking the information from the geotech report, coming into designing foundation, designing how the walls are built, understanding the roof, snow load, wind load, whole 9 yards. Building codes, one thing to point out, depending where you are, some municipalities, counties, states will actually have different codes, slight nuances of when they need inspections, what needs to be completed, and how you have to go about that. So that's something to take into account when you select a site, understand that project area, go back and do that local research, and go all the way down to that municipal level. Because sometimes municipalities roll up to the county, sometimes they roll up to the state, sometimes they have their own little nuances. So that's something critical that we need to look at. Site survey and boundary. Having a surveyor go out there. A lot of the AML projects that we work on use LiDAR, which is just basically computer, flowing at a high level. But sometimes you need to go out and spot check. So do you need to actually do a topographic survey of the area? Do you need to check LiDAR? Sometimes LiDAR is not as accurate as it thinks it is. So having that spot check and understanding those boundaries. Understanding what's actually on the site. Sometimes if you're on a completely green site, this is something that doesn't need to happen. But what if there's buildings on site? What if you're putting a system next to another system that's functioning, or adding on to a system? Understanding where those utilities are, understanding where those buildings are, understanding grades, parking lots, understanding the widths. That goes into utility location. Doing the PA1 call. you're building a site, do a PA1 call, there might be utilities running right along the road where your access road's gonna pop out. Okay, what are those utilities? How are we gonna, make sure that our truck traffic isn't, impacting that water line or electrical line, or, they don't cut it going through. Boundary survey and monument setting kind of go into that AML feature. Mostly something that doesn't need to occur on a lot of projects, but if you are working with multiple property owners and moving large piles of dirt to reclaim an area, they want to know where their property line is. They want to know where their pins are. So making sure we have that data, on accurate deeds and plotted before the work's done, so that it can be reset after the work is completed. Lastly, construction administration and inspection. So this is, now you've designed your project, you've done all this work, and now we're going to take it out to bid. So now, setting out the construction plans, setting out the bid notice, following any requirements that your funding might have, how you're going to be, how you have to advertise, understanding if there's DBE requirements, if it's over a certain threshold, or they have to sign, forms to ensure that they're using those types of materials. Selecting the contractor. So once you get bids back from those contractors, looking for a lot of these places, what I like to say is don't just look at the lowest bid, lowest responsible bid. Okay? Something that I've noticed in construction is most contractors have a bell curve. If you get a bunch of contractors, you have one really low, one really high, and then a bunch in the middle. So either that one really low has some very, very new process and understands something way, way different than everybody else, or they miss something potentially. So looking at what their price is and why is everything else up here where all of them might be within a smaller amount. So this is very critical in trying to save yourself some money on that end. Okay, making sure that you're not just selecting based on dollars, but making sure that they addressed all your concerns and have everything in your budget. I've reviewed contractors' bids that have not put, we spec, hey, you need timber mats to get across this wetland to access the site, and they're like, oh no, we're just gonna drive through it. No, can't do that. So that's a reason to disqualify a bid, because they did not do what was asked of them. So bid review is very cool. Construction oversight. Once you selected your contractor, making sure they're doing what they should be doing. Okay, making sure it's very specific. If you have a specific construction sequence in your design plans, that this needs to be done before this. For example, you have an access road with a old 10-inch culvert that was a logging road that the guy drove his four-wheeler across. Great. Contractor says, oh, we're going to start, doing all the work back there at your site. We'll upgrade the culvert last. How are you getting trucks across that 10-inch pipe without disturbing that stream? So making sure they're following that, making sure they're understanding that. Inspections. This is something you see in varying degrees. Some projects have a construction inspector out there the entire time. Some go out there on a weekly basis, monthly basis, depending where you are. Based on the project, it's something very critical that you should use your best judgment. But it's something that should be thought of prior to applying for any funding fund or construction funds, to understand, okay, we need an inspector out there 2 days a week. Construction is going to last 30 weeks. Okay, so I need 60 days of a construction inspector out there, plus a contingency if it does run long, or they have a call that you need to go out there on another day. So something to think about. Punch list items. Once your site's built, you want to go through and make sure everything was built how it should be. Making sure, like, hey, you said you were going to do this, but you didn't. Here's a punch list item. It was in your contract. Understanding that. And then finally, the contractor payout. Contractors want to get paid. So if they hit certain milestones, they want to get paid. So going back to the partnership with the accounting component, having that accountant that, hey, contractor submitted invoices. He's at 30%. Can we release this? Yes. He's hit all these milestones. We're good to release this 30% payment. And so on and so forth. So those are components through the whole building process. Last, time management. This is one I can't stress enough, because time, depending on what your funding is. We see grants that have 3 years to be spent. We see grants that have 2 years to be spent. We see funding that needs to be spent as soon as possible so we can get more funding. Okay, so understanding how long you have that funding, what step in the process you are, and how long it's going to take. Permit review times are something that I think a lot of people miss. So on Chapter 105, does anybody here know what the permit review time is for a joint permit in Chapter 105?
I mean the official?
The official permit review time,
Is it the official 90 days?
120.
120, okay.
Okay.
Well, they never meet it.
We're not gonna go there. I need another 45 minutes to talk about that. So. Okay, 120 days. Now, you get comments, you come off the clock, and then a whole other topic. But that needs to be reviewed. Okay, what permits can be reviewed concurrently? Okay, I've run into situations where I have a joint permit and NPDS permit. The NPDS permit doesn't want to approve there because I don't have an approved joint permit. The joint permit doesn't want to approve that because the NPDS permit's not approved. Okay, guys, somebody's got to talk to each other here. You know, how are we going to overcome that? So that's something to definitely consider. You know, and then you get elevated into like Army Corps reviews or even some of the like U.S. Fish and Wildlife for bat or bog turtle stuff. Those permit review times, they don't have times. I just had a project recently. It took 2 years for the Army Corps to give me approval. So some things you can anticipate. I would not anticipate 2 years. That was a very specific circumstance, but you need to build those into your timelines going through design in between your final design and construction starting. Funding and grant timelines we already spoke about, understanding where those fundings are coming from, when they expire, understanding if there's ability to extend those funds, any. We want to make sure that those funds, you know, hey, some funds say, hey, we'll give you an extra year, but that's it. You know, so understanding how that works. Meeting approvals. Sometimes you need to get township approvals, county approvals, going to a public meeting. So you have to anticipate, okay, they meet once a month. I need to have this project on the agenda 1 week prior to that meeting. So now I need to have my project completely designed and everything ready to go through that meeting so they can approve this so I can continue to move on. That also ties into some of the permits. Some of the building permits and other permits, you need those permits in place before you can even apply for the next round of permits. So understanding those timelines. Public comment period. With a joint permit, you have to have a 30-day public comment period. You have to put it on PA Digest, post it. That's just 30 days, you're just sitting there. That is something that is missed so often in projects. I've gotten so many calls from people from DEP and they're like, hey, where's the public comment? We're like, well, we sent you the bulletins you posted. Oh, I forgot. It'll be 30 days so I can give you this approval. Right, there's another month gone. Well, that month can be the difference of getting that project's bid, you know, at the beginning of the year to now mid-season. Orders of submission we've talked about, and then plan for delays. I've seen too many RFPs come out from a consulting standpoint that say, okay, you have this, and it's like, well, you have 120 days to get the joint permit, you're done. Well, whoa. So I have 120 days. Well, what happens if I don't need 120 days? Plan for those delays. You know, I'm not saying put an extra 120 days in, but give yourself a little buffer on some of those submissions. Because if something happens, we've had public meetings, they're canceled. We're in the agenda. Oh, public meeting got canceled, we don't have enough for a quorum. We'll see you next month. Well, that doesn't help me. We need to get this moving. But things that happen. So expect the unexpected. Lastly, pulling it all together. If you do everything right, which there are sometimes you do it right, there's sometimes you do it wrong, there's sometimes you just get lucky. And I'd much rather be lucky than good any day. But projects are complex. Every project's different. Every project has their own little nuance. You are not putting the same project that has the same geologic features, the same environmental impacts, the same buffers, the same permitting, the same review people. Is there anybody from DEP in here?
Not raising my hand.
Sometimes DEP reviewers have different thoughts on a permit. That's all I'll say. So, nothing is exactly the same. So everything can be changed. Having a good team can handle anything. If you have the right people and built the right team at the beginning and have those partnerships built and the review agencies know what's happening up front, you have a good team of, you know, the lead entity, your project manager, your engineers, you know, your public support system, the whole 9 yards. You can handle anything. You can overcome things. That's why that's important. Expect the unexpected. I already said that, but I forgot it was on this slide. That is probably the biggest thing. Plan for the worst and hope for the best. That's one of my philosophies I live with in project management. I expect it's gonna take 120 days. I've had joint permits come back in less than 2 weeks. It happens. I'm not saying it happens every time, but plan for the worst, hope for the best. Ask for help. I've seen more people try to put their head down and plow through things, cause undue stress, cause more harm than good, because they are unsure. They don't want to ask for help. They don't want to go to somebody that might know a little bit more. They don't want to call DEP and ask them a question. They don't want to call the engineer. They don't want to call the landowner and ask a tough question. Ask for help. Everybody has the same goal, to get that project to the finish line. Asking for help because you need help, there's nothing wrong with that. And to finish that off, we all have the same goal. On A&D AML projects, our goal is to improve the Pennsylvania wilds, improve water quality, make Pennsylvania to what it was. We all want to see, I want to see more fish in the stream. I want to see better habitat for animals. I want to see people enjoying that landscape and not be walking through the woods and run into a 50-foot high wall or see orange streams. We all have the same goal. We all want to get there. Following, hopefully some of these tips will make some of your projects a little bit more successful. So with that, I thank you all. Anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts?
I have a thought, as someone from the nonprofit sector of the partnership realm and sometimes hiring consultants. Just, I guess, kind of a thought for you as the consultant or anybody in the room. It would actually like make you look way better as hiring a consultant for one of these projects if you had like a chart that kind of went through your timeline thing and you show that to the person, you know, whoever at the nonprofit who is like trying to hire a consultant, like this is the timeline we're looking at, and you know, check boxes and stuff that you know, help them follow some kind of schedule.
So I think it's a great point, because I've been asked that, I've done that for people. I'm going to flip it around just a little bit.
Yeah.
From a consultant side to a nonprofit side.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things I think people underutilize consultants. We are not just a specialty service that is there to design, to do a permit, design this, do that. Mm-hmm. We want to be a project partner. You hired us because of our expertise. We want to be brought in to tell you, hey, there's this. And sometimes we come in there and it's like, well, we have to do this, and now the time schedule's blown up. Yeah. Or the funding's running out. We have to use this funding in this many days. Well, I can't get you to construction in that many days. So having people involved early in that process, or having a consultant that wants to be a partner and not just sit there and collect their invoice check, is very critical. And that's something why it goes back to the partnership. I have a lot of my clients, and I'm not just trying to sell Larson, there's a lot of great consultants out there in that room. A lot of my colleagues, I've worked with a lot of people that out there. Bring us in early to understand that and make us a part of that team. Not just oh, hey, just do this and send it back. Because then we're just technical experts. We're not actually a partner in the project. We're just a technical expert doing a part of the project. Bring us in the whole picture and have that project manager from that consulting team saying, okay, we want to understand the whole picture. How does this impact this? Oh, by us doing this might cause some public relations issues. Okay, let's change this and change our message. That is a critical component of this partnership. You know.
One thing on the line of reasoning, because my firm has always done that also, working as partners with the entire project from getting the grant through right through construction. But one thing I'm seeing as a hindrance to that is the bean counters want more accountability, and they want the engineering services now bid out and stuff like that, which makes it a lot harder for us to be that project partner through the whole entire project.
No, I do agree. We run into the same thing. Hey, we've worked with this, and now this funding source says it's got to be low bid, and
yeah.
You know, and that's something that I think you're all, as consultants, we have to work through that. But if you can involve that person and understand that as part of it, that's why I say low bid is not always the best value. It's just easier on the pocketbook. But if you have somebody that doesn't want to be a project partner, and this isn't just contractors, this is consultants, anybody that you have to bid a project out. Like we always tell people, look at the whole thing. What value are they bringing? I've won projects and haven't been the low bid. It's because I brought this to the table. I've lost projects when I was a low bid because they wanted something different. And that's why a lot of these places do say lowest responsible bid. So you do have the ability to say, well, these were the lowest cost, but they are not addressing what we wanted, which then becomes a responsibility. You know, it all goes into your funding. There's nuances there, so I'm not going to go into that because I'm not a lawyer. But yes, I do agree. But the more you can bring us in on that, and then that also helps with scoping issues. I know there's a couple consultants here in the room. We've all seen scopes come out for projects that haven't identified all of this, and then we do this thing that everybody hates, change orders. You know, nobody likes change orders and see the project be increased. But if you're told us I have to do A, B, and C, and all of a sudden Z comes up, we have to do something. So, but better project planning,